welcome back to my channel for another episode of Rehab at Home with Colleen. Today we wanted to go over questions that came in about our Rewire the Brain blog, which you can find at strokerewind.com. Specifically, this blog goes over what neurogenesis is, what neuroplasticity is, and why that's important to your rehab journey and recovering. And therapists will use these words all the time. So the more you know what these mean, the better off you'll be in being able to use these techniques to get better. Let's start with the term neurogenesis. So genesis, you're gonna think regenerate. That's your brain's ability to regenerate cells after a stroke. So the thing that you need to know about neurogenesis is that there's two things you can do to help this process along. That is, one, start intensive therapy as soon as you can. And two, alternate that intensive therapy with sleep. So if you don't have one or both of those puzzle pieces, you're not going to be helping your brain regenerate the cells as quickly as they could. So think of this, if you're in the hospital and you're not sleeping and they're trying to do therapy with you and you're not doing it well or it's not a high quality, then you're lacking those two things. So make sure you're talking to your doctor. Make sure you're bringing that person, maybe your loved one, their favorite pillow or a blanket, or you're putting a sign on the door to say, hey hospital staff, please try not to bother me from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. because you guys keep coming in my room and I can't sleep. If I'm not sleeping, I can't do intensive therapy. So make sure as you go along your recovery journey from the hospital to maybe a rehab center, maybe you go home, maybe you're going out into the community and doing outpatient therapy, you really want to make sure you're thinking about rest, intensive therapy to kickstart that neurogenesis or regeneration of cells in your brain. So the second big word I talk about in my blog is neuroplasticity. So if you think about the word, it has the word plastic in it. And essentially the term was coined to show that plastic is moldable when heated up, right? So think about this. When you want to elicit neuroplasticity, and you will hear your therapist say it all the time when they're working with you, they're talking about how do you rewire the brain. Now, what can you do to help rewire the brain is repetition. I'm gonna keep saying repetition because you need to do repetition. If you do one exercise, one time, it's not gonna make a difference. So let me show you an example. Therapy putty, okay? If I play with this therapy putty for 5 minutes and just kind of do this, it's not enough repetition for my brain to start to figure out how to retrain that motor piece of movement that I want to get back. So I need to play with it for let's say an hour, or I want to play a game with it that takes more time than a game that doesn't, or I want to make it more intense. So with neuroplasticity, plastic or rewire, think intensity. It has to be intense, and you have to take the amount of time and repetition to rewire that brain. Another example, if you want to be able to sit and stand better, you can't just do 5 sit-to-stands, you need to do 100 sit-to-stands. And then you need to do that 5 days a week. And then you need to do that for 3 weeks. And by the end of that 3 weeks, you're gonna be standing like a rock star. So make sure you pay attention if you hear the word neuroplasticity and think rewire and think repetition. So the third thing I want to talk about that you can find in the blog is something called the sensory motor strip. The sensory motor strip is basically there's 2 strips in your brain, one sensory, one motor, and that's the way your brain and body communicate with each other. And that can be interrupted after a stroke. So the way to wake that up, there's all these different therapy techniques we use, but essentially if you can get your hand or your leg to feel something, you're gonna be able to wake up that connection so the hand starts to do something. So for more information on that, specifically for maybe someone who doesn't have an arm that is working at all, you wanna check out the course I put out that's called Therapy for a Low Tone Arm. That's a very simple way of saying, I had a stroke, my arm isn't moving at all, and now I wanna figure out how to wake it up, but where do I start? You start by waking up that sensory motor strip. I have over 50 exercises and activities that you can do to start that process. So be sure to check that out at strokerewind.com. And also, if you go to the blog, you can print all these words out, all this information out that I just talked about neurogenesis, about neuroplasticity, and about your sensory motor strip. So if you like the content that I put out in this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. The more subscriptions we get, the more comments we get and engagement, the easier it is for us to put out videos like this and to know what you want to know. So make sure you subscribe, and thanks again for watching.